Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Max Chafkin.
Stacey Vanek Smith, how are you?
Good. I have a kind of weird question for you.
All right, hit me.
So your outfit today.
Today, yeah.
It's like a plaid, kind of an olive greeny shirt, and then green pants. So did you plan this carefully? What went into the choosing of this look?
Stacey, I have 3 small children, and I had to take my kids to school leave the house at 6:30 this morning, so I was basically fumbling in the dark.
Okay, so when darkness chooses your outfit, how much would you say your look this morning costs?
I think that this shirt, which I bought
range.
5 years ago, probably costs like $120, and these pants.
That shirt costs $120?
It's harsh.
I just asking questions.
It's wool.
Okay.
It's a natural
It's
fiber.
very nice.
It's why it's lasted
Lovely.
so long.
Yeah.
And I don't know, these pants, maybe $100.
Okay, so with that in mind, let me play you this clip.
My name is Anna, and I'm the author of the new book called The Double Tax, a book about how expensive it is to be a woman. So naturally, we went out into the streets of Philly and asked folks, do you think being a woman is expensive? Here's what they had to say.
Yeah, it's expensive to be a woman.
Say more.
These braids.
Girl.
These toes.
Girl.
Anna Gifty Opoku-Agyeman, she goes onto the streets of Philadelphia to talk to citizens about the cost of womanhood. In her book, Anna looks at how Black women shoulder a lot of hidden costs and at the same time are missing out on a lot of earning potential.
Yeah, and this is a big topic for us at Everybody's Business. We talk all the time about the costs and how those costs influence things that maybe people don't notice or don't notice immediately. And Anna believes this is an area where we need to take a closer look.
If you don't address these costs that are arising for women of color, especially Black women, those costs left unaddressed will eventually affect everybody else.
We had a great discussion with Anna about Black women and the economy and what it's like to be a worker right now. And also, it is Fashion Week here in New York. However, the mood in the industry right now is a little bit sour.
These fashion shows don't really matter.
After we hit the streets, we have a conversation with business journalist Lauren Sherman. And then, of course, underrated stories.
It's Everybody's Business. I'm Max Chafkin.
And I'm Stacey Vanek Smith.
Stacey, let's first quickly run through the headlines. And I think the big one is that the U.S. economy, for all the kind of warning signs that we talk about on this show all the time, it's chugging along.
Well, this is this big debate happening right now. And I think this week it came to a head like many weeks. The stock market's been hitting these record highs. The Dow Jones Industrial Average hit 50,000, which I'm laughing because that number is so high. And we got a good jobs report. We'll talk about that a little later in the show. Surprisingly good. At the same time, people are saying, there is this disconnect. A lot of parts of the economy do not feel great, the job market being one of them. So there's this weird kind of disconnect, these dueling narratives.
I gotta say, I am starting to wonder if maybe the economy is just good. And
we just can't.
And the vibe session was just too many journalists spending too much time on social media or something. But then the other thing I think about when I say that out loud is probably that is the moment when the economy goes bad. Because in an economic bubble, right before it bursts, everyone always says,
you feel like your words wield this level of control and power over the U.S. economy.
That by saying that, I am going to bring a recession into existence.
Us.
So
well, to that I would say
in good shape, sort of, maybe. I don't know.
I feel like when you dive a little more deeply into the numbers, some of the issues make sense. Hiring is the lowest it's been in decades. And although we did add a lot of jobs in January, which was awesome, almost all the jobs were in healthcare. So if you work in a field other than healthcare, and also media and tech tend to get a lot of press and be quite high-profile industries, and those have both been shedding a lot of jobs. So I think that's part of the reason. But I think you're right. Maybe things are not as bad as we feel like they are.
I guess we should acknowledge that the Trump administration seems to be backing down in Minnesota. Tom Homan announcing that the immigration blitz that has really dominated the headlines and led to protests around the country is ending. hard to know what that means and whether, the Trump administration is just going to move on to another target or whether this is a real shift in strategy. But it would make sense that Trump would want to back down, given that we're coming into a sort of midterm election season. These immigration policies have been hugely unpopular, and there is a real concern around affordability, which seems like perhaps more profitable political issue for Trump.
And there are a lot of really key industries that have a lot of immigrants working in them, including agriculture and food preparation. And if people are either self-deporting or leaving or less inclined to look for work in the U.S., we could see those prices go up, which is also, I think just not great for a lot of reasons, but also I think for Trump politically not great. So, Max, I feel a little bad that I outfit shamed you at the top of the show.
Ridiculous. There's been no outfit shaming on you to date.
I'm wearing a black shirt. There's nothing to shame.
How much?
Oh, was this shirt $30 or $40? It was on sale.
Nice. I do think we need to broaden this beyond the cost of our outfits.
Yeah, agreed.
And talk about these hidden costs and bring in Anna Gifty Opoku-Agyeman. Welcome, Anna.
Hi, how are you?
Good. It is Black History Month. We also just got jobs numbers out this week. What is the economy like for Black workers right now compared to the overall situation for workers in the U.S.?
It's rough. The way to contextualize that is Black unemployment typically is higher than white unemployment usually, right? And there's a lot of structural reasons for why that's the case. Like if you think about the number of resumes that Black job seekers have to send out in order to get a call back, it's more than their white counterparts. And that's always been the case, right? So if you take that and add it to a manufactured job crisis, right? In the sense that a lot of jobs are being offloaded from the federal workforce. And then you also have sort of this air of disincentivizing certain types of jobs from existing that may disproportionately be occupied by Black workers. In addition to the fact that AI itself also is starting to affect the job market and in different ways, by the way, going back to hiring, we know there's a current, I think, active lawsuit against Workday where they're using an AI hiring tool that's known to be biased against racial minorities and LGBTQ plus individuals. So if you combine all of those things together, Black folks who are trying to get a job right now are just facing a very steep climb.
Yeah, I believe the unemployment rate's almost double. I mean, I think it's 4.3% for the overall population, and I think among Black workers, it's 7.5%.
Anna, can you explain this idea of the double tax?
The double tax is essentially the compounded cost of racism and sexism. I think the way to think about it is we're all tethered in our economic realities. We're all in the same economic block, so to speak. And so a lot of times people will say, what's happening to Black women doesn't really matter to me because it's happening at that house, but we're all in the same neighborhood. So if my house is on fire and you don't put the fire out at my house, it's probably going to spread to your house eventually. And that's essentially what we've kind of seen happen recently in the economy and elsewhere. And I think misogynoir and stuff is helpful to kind of contextualize what happens to Black women specifically. But when you start talking about the double tax, it includes how, honestly, one's proximity to Black women actually affects their ability to experience true equality and true liberation.
When you say misogynoir, what does that mean?
So misogynoir is specifically prejudice and discrimination against Black women. So I like to say that the double tax is the quantification of misogynoir. I'll give you a clear example of this, but the attacks on Governor Lisa Cook perfectly illustrate this.
First Black woman to be a governor of the Federal Reserve.
Exactly, right? So they go after her and they attack her. And I'm not going to say that people didn't have a reaction to that. I think people did. But I think there were certain entities that didn't take that very seriously. And then we got a 9 p.m. video from Fed Chair Jerome Powell a month ago where he was like, yo, they're trying to indict me, right? For criminal allegations. What are we doing here? But I think it really did start with Governor Cook. So it's almost like if you don't address these costs that are arising for women of color, especially Black women, those costs left unaddressed will eventually affect everybody else.
What about at this moment? I feel like we're at a moment where people feel like there's not a lot of hiring going on. There's a little bit of a zero-sum game. I feel like there's a little bit of the other side of that coin, where it's like if that person does better in this workforce, that's a job that I'm not going to get. Is that true?
I think that while folks are thinking about that on the job applicant side, it's not clear that employers are not thinking that way. In the sense that, like, they're also thinking through the trade-offs of what kind of workers they want. And because it's a bit of an employer market, right, they know there's more folks who want jobs than there are jobs. They could also be thinking about it through, okay, well, if I can just get whoever I want, then sure, I can enact bias and sure, I can enact discrimination. And it's not really being checked because I'm just going for the best worker, right? I think in terms of the zero-sum game between the job candidates themselves, I think it can definitely feel that way. I know there's this sort of term of vibe-session. And I know that Daryl Fairweather has talked about how we're kind of going through a hiring recession. But I don't know if anybody has really explored the vibes of that sort of no hire, no fire scenario. But because of these additional barriers, I'm being screened out.
There's also a real pay issue. I know the pay gap between women and men writ large, gets a lot of press. It's 82 cents on the dollar, but it's different for Black women.
Yeah, it's worse. So I think it was when I was writing the chapter on retirement and the end of life that I was like, oh my gosh, if all of these costs go unaddressed, it shows up right here. And so I think that, like, this issue of pay trickles down to all of the other aspects of a woman's life. I like to say a woman who's backed up by a bank account is a free woman, right? And so if you aren't able to up and leave because you have to financially depend on somebody else, or you're tethered to a job that's low wage and low benefits, you're really trapped in your circumstance. And one thing that was really interesting to see is that, we know that Black women in particular have higher student loan debt, right? We know that there are barriers for women, especially Black women, when they're buying homes. These all come back to sort of how much income are you bringing in? How much money do you have in the bank? And also kind of colors whether or not individuals are even able to start the kind of lives that they believe they deserve.
Anna, you brought this up at the top of the conversation, like, if there's a house on your block that's on fire, it affects the entire block. If you have a massive inequality in your society, like, that's going to lead to a less healthy society. I feel like intuitively that makes a lot of sense. But I want to ask, like, why you know that to be true, especially like at a time when, like, huge parts of the kind of like corporate world, as well as like a big chunk of the Republican Party, sort of decided en masse, like, not to worry about this stuff.
Well, not even not to worry about it, but to
actually need to, that the big problem is actually anti-white discrimination, right? Donald Trump, Elon Musk, they talk about that all the time.
It has been tough.
And like, why is that sense of double taxation? Why having, like, classes of people in your society getting paid a fraction of what other people make is bad, like bad economically?
These same people care about GDP growth, right? But if everybody in your society can't fully participate in the economy, your economy will shrink. That's inevitable. What's interesting about what you specifically talked about with anti-white discrimination, which, by the way, is not a thing. Not according to the empirical evidence that we currently got, at least not in hiring, not in promotion, and definitely not in college admissions. Let me just go ahead and squash that right now, is that there is a fact that underlies all of that, which is the demographics of this country are changing rapidly, right? So 1 in 4 Gen Z identify Hispanic. Gen Alpha, the immediate next generation, is majority minority. To put it lightly, we cannot afford to ignore swaths of people who are double taxed, right? Unless you want this country to crumble, it's just not sustainable. It's not economically feasible. I can give you an example of what I mean, maybe overseas. So you're starting to see sort of anti-immigrant sentiment in the UK, in Germany, kind of reemerge. What's ironic about it is those economies rely heavily on the immigrant population. In fact, it's part of their history, right? Like after the World Wars, like they said, hey, we need extra hands to help build our economy up. And so now this is like this sort of reversion and we're going to reject these individuals who help build up our economy. You actually can't afford to. They make up too much of an important role in your economy. And I think we honestly see this even in what's happening in agriculture, which is not getting a whole lot of attention right now. You see these sort of ICE raids that are taking place. You see sort of the attacks on undocumented immigrants. You know, there's certain people on the right who are like, oh yeah, like rah, rah, but like, you're not going to be able to eat. That's the gag, right? So like, this is what I mean by folks are double taxed and you're trying to make it seem like those double taxes are happening in isolation. But the reality is what happens to that group is going to matter for your group. And so you can't ignore it because we're really just sitting in one huge Venn diagram.
I feel like, Anna, there were a lot of gains in a lot of parts of the labor force, but when the labor market was really hot in like the end of 2001, 2002, and it seemed like we saw real wages rise for the first time in a long time. We saw a lot of gains. Now that the job economy is not doing so well, it seems like this kind of reversed so fast. We saw the Black unemployment rate go up by 1.5%, I think in a year, right, if I'm not wrong, yes, which is nuts.
Yes.
What is your take on that as an economist?
I think when we talk about Black unemployment, there's a lot of structural barriers that already existed prior to this current administration entering that White House. But I do think that there have been decisions made by a variety of institutions that has harmed Black individuals disproportionately. Decisions like, we don't care about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that being synonymous with really, we just don't care about Black perspectives. And that's not necessarily the definition of DEI, but that is how people are equating the two. And so it's having impacts on whether or not certain Black women in particular have jobs in corporate America, because that's where they've been essentially, I would say, occupationally segregated into in terms of some of these corporate roles. Decisions like, we're going to go ahead and cut huge swaths of the federal workforce. And again, those cuts might have a particularly negative effect on certain marginalized groups. That includes Black individuals, right? So I think that there are these policy decisions that are being made, and they're not being made in isolation. They are decisions that are really affecting our entire economy and our economy's ability to grow. And so if we talk about like, how do we get back to how things were, I think we need to be accountable to how things have come to be. And before we move forward, we should figure out, okay, how did we get here in the first place? And hopefully, based off of what we diagnose ourselves of, we can then say, okay, here's what we're going to prescribe to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
So, Max, as we mentioned earlier, it is Fashion Week here in New York.
Oh, my favorite time of the year.
It is a special season, but it is sort of integrated. There are lots of fashion shows all over different parts of the city. And our producer, Jasmine JT Green, went out to the fashion shows to talk to people about specifically fashion, but also luxury.
What has been your vision of luxury lately?
I feel like luxury used to have a bit more quality productions.
Now it's economical crisis and people not ready to spend a lot of money for the luxury stuff.
I feel like with social media and the internet and different people within the industry becoming like aware of their leverage of talking about upcycling, and hopefully the trend continues for the younger generations.
I feel like now, since fashion is becoming, a lot more accessible to more people, I think that the brands are producing in terms of quantity rather than quality.
Wear comfortable, looks good styles, and actually it should be like affordable.
We don't have to buy everything new. There's luxury in remaking things. The truest luxury is time. And then from there, like with this time, how can I think about making better things and better decisions with my money and my time?
Amen to that. The truest luxury is time.
You did choose your clothing in the dark. So I do feel like this is a little bit
right
your
up
mantra.
My alley.
clearly, Max, people are feeling a little bit skeptical about putting down the kind of money you have to put down to get luxury goods.
And it's the perfect segue to our guest, Lauren Sherman, who is a writer at Puck. She hosts the Fashion People podcast. She also wrote the book Selling Sexy, Victoria's Secret, and the Unraveling of an American Icon. Lauren is also kind of a Fashion Week skeptic, and she's here.
It is Fashion Week, by the way.
And she is here to tell us about it. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I got to admit something to both of you, which is that I have lived in this city, New York City, for like pretty much my entire life. And I do not know anything about Fashion Week. And I feel like I know that it is very important. But to start, Lauren, what is Fashion Week and like how does it sort of compare to previous years or how is it evolving?
Sure. So there are 4 major fashion weeks: New York, London, Milan, and Paris. They became really big in the 1990s. They were always for the trade, so editors and buyers to see the clothes and communicate what the clothes look like or to buy them for their stores. There are way fewer stores than used to be. People can just see the images on the internet. So now fashion shows are essentially a marketing tool. And in the last 20 years, the fashion industry really has concentrated in Milan and Paris, where the big luxury groups are based. So New York Fashion Week, yes, it contributes a lot to the GDP. But the reality is there aren't a lot of people coming into the city now for these shows. It's mostly local editors and buyers and a lot of influencers with the rise of influencers, that type of thing. And the brands use it as a marketing tool. I don't live in New York anymore. I lived here for 15 years. Being in the city, I don't really notice Fashion Week like it used to because there used to be the Bryant Park tents and all that.
Well, one of the functions, at least as I understand it, of Fashion Week, though, is to sort of like set the trends, kind of announce what the new trends are for the season. And that does impact like billions and billions of dollars all over the world.
I'm sorry, not really. Like the thing is, these fashion shows don't really matter. Like, to be honest, like the ones that matter are in Europe, and also the trends really start on the street. So a lot of times what the runway does is it commercializes trends that are on the street or at couture or the big shows in Europe. So last season at New York Fashion Week, there were tons of dance dresses, which had been like very big in Paris for the last few years.
Like ballet-ish?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I would say, look, and the other thing is we live in this very fragmented culture where a lot of people are just getting their fashion ideas from TikTok. So it used to be that you would go to Fashion Week and you say, here are the colors that are really popular. Here are the trends that are really big. And that still exists to an extent. But I would say that it's not as much how the retailers inform their buy, that sort of thing. It really does only exist so that consumers know what the names of these brands.
We talk all the time about the K-shaped economy, right? And I feel, and we've spoken a lot recently about the bottom of the K and all the economic issues, the sort of job insecurity, stuff's getting more expensive. And then we've sort of been hoping that the top of the K, the sort of luxury industry, very wealthy consumers, are going to save us, save our economy. And yet there's talk anyway of kind of a luxury slowdown. Like what are you seeing? Is the top of the K as strong as it has been? Is it what's happening in the business?
The tippy top of the K is strong and will always be strong because the rich
Thank
keep
goodness.
Getting richer. But the size of these businesses, so this industry has been consolidating for the last 20 years, thanks to growth in China, thanks to changes in the way consumers behave. The challenge is the industry was growing. It was at the center of pop culture thanks to music and all these celebrity, all this stuff. 2018, I'd say it peaked. It was just everybody wanted a Gucci loafer or what have you. Essentially, that bubble was about to burst pre-COVID, but then COVID extended it and the growth even accelerated. After COVID, the bubble burst and consumers, they're very obsessed with experience. They have 40 bags in their closet. They don't need more. And the brands sort of got lazy with the stuff they were producing and assumed I can sell a $5,000 handbag that is ugly to anyone and they'll just buy it because they'll buy anything. And that kind of behavior stopped. And consumers are asking a lot more of these brands, especially in China, where I think that the luxury brands really underestimated the sophistication and discernment of the consumer. So the really high-end customer who's spending, $100,000 plus a year is still spending that. It's the person who was maybe buying 2 handbags, but en masse, that they're going to struggle to win back. And so I think the next 2 or 3 years, that's what we're going to see.
How are things looking right now in the luxury business? Are we seeing some brands maybe going away? Obviously, it sounds like the super top is doing okay, but what about the kind of the middle brands like a Coach, who's mid-luxury?
Coach is actually doing super well right now because they had a hit handbag and the price value equation, as they love to say.
What was their hit handbag?
Harvard Business School. They have a couple. They have one called the Tabby. They have this tote that I think it's called the Brooklyn tote. It's just a tote bag.
Max and I are both looking it up.
Let me see this Tabby.
The Coach thing is amazing to me.
It just looks very classic. It looks
just classic, and it's a good value. So a 28-year-old can afford it. And
I mean, it is $300.
Oh yeah, this tote. I see this everywhere.
Yeah.
But
or
$500.
A bag. Most bags from luxury brands start at $4,500. So it's a very good value. But other brands in that space are not performing. I think what is like a Michael Kors or something. The change is that the consumer thinks they know a lot and they feel educated and they only want to buy stuff that they feel like is worth the money. And so the brands that are imparting that through their marketing and the product itself are winning. Burberry's doing really well in that space because they're super focused on outerwear and trenches. Moncler had their best January ever. It's cold, so people bought jackets. A lot of the fashion business we were talking about New York Fashion Week is smoke and mirrors. And you're not going to see a ton of them go away, but what you will see is a sort of change in their place in the culture. And so it's a very interesting time. It's been so much consolidation, and we all know what happens after consolidation: decline. So are we entering the state of managed decline? I think potentially. And it's exciting for me as a business journalist because I've been writing about this stuff since 2006 when the consolidation really started. But it's not going to be simple. There will always be people who want this stuff. But again, we live in a more virtual world. People don't go out as much as they used to. They need a top for Zoom, and they need a couple dresses, and they need one nice pair of shoes. And even if you are a shopping addict, you're going to be spending it on plastic surgery now.
You mentioned Chinese consumers becoming more price sensitive or value sensitive or whatever. Is there a sense that Chinese luxury brands, do those have any sway? Because in other areas where big American companies have sort of counted on Chinese consumers, like in consumer electronics, that's been a big factor, the domestic market, and even in entertainment, right? Domestic Chinese films to some extent are crowding out Hollywood fare. Is that happening in fashion?
It is happening, and I often reference the fact that the top 10 grossing movies last year, I think 2 of them were just in China and only distributed in China. It's finally happening in fashion. It took a lot longer because I think brand value and history and all of that stuff, some of these fashion companies or leather goods brands are 500 years old. It's the history does matter when you're trying to sell something to someone. But yes, I think there's a really good example is this brand Ariel that is a sub-brand of the Chinese outerwear giant Bosideng, and they just hired this guy Kim Jones, who used to be the menswear designer at Dior and the womenswear designer at Fendi, both LVMH brands, to create this capsule collection. He's the creative director of Ariel. And I had never heard of Bosideng, but it is a huge, huge company. And it is mostly the last time I was in Paris for the couture shows, there at Galeries Lafayette, there was a huge display of all the Kim Jones product. And it was one of those things that Western companies they were arrogant and thought it would never happen. And now it is, because of the fact that the consumer in many cases feels like they've been sort of lied to about the value that these products actually have.
interested in why people you think are becoming pickier or more discerning or demanding more. Is it because they have less money or something else going on?
I would say that I think it's a combo of a bunch of things. One is that they don't have as much money. Two is that they have so much stuff already. Why do they need more? And if it's not cute or new looking, if it doesn't feel new, if it just feels like the stuff you already have, it's boring to keep buying it. The third part is the secondhand market, which I think that the luxury industry really underestimated the impact of that. But the reality of it is, in the last 10 years, people are very comfortable buying secondhand now. You can buy a Louis Vuitton Neverfull, a Louis Vuitton tote on the RealReal very easily, or Vestiaire or Poshmark, these things. And look, that's not every single person, but there are a lot of consumers. Those companies are online. They do a ton of online marketing. Consumers know that they exist. And so a lot of this product, they think, well, I'll just buy it when it goes on the secondhand market. So if there was a bag that you coveted that came out in 1998, you can find it. And it's probably going to be an eighth of what the new bags cost. So I would say that those are the three big factors.
It's like luxury's competing with itself, its own
totally.
The ghost of luxury past.
And they've decided not to engage on the secondhand market for the most part. And I understand why it's hard to make a profit off of those refurbishing bags and things, but at the same time, they're not controlling that and they control everything else.
But are there opportunities at the lower end? And I'm thinking here about, like, there was this viral Birkin dupe that was big on TikTok last year, like a Walmart Birkin dupe, or Bad Bunny wearing Zara at the Super Bowl. Or, like, is there any opportunity for sort of companies to come in at the lower end, more inexpensive stuff, and kind of steal market share from some of these luxury companies?
Sure. Look, I think at the lower end, that's a different proposition, and you can't even really compare them. Zara has done an interesting job of moving up market and trying to distance themselves not only from H&M, but also from Shein and some of the really, really fast fashion competitors. And that's why it was so interesting that Bad Bunny wore it, because it's kind of now seen as, I don't know, aspirational, but it's also available to a lot of people. So it was really savvy, I thought, on his part to wear Zara. But sure, I think that the real opportunity is in that market where Coach sits and Tory Burch, and the aspirational market, where what that market typically is just copies of designer stuff. But if you can kind of make it feel more individual and more special, a consumer who used to buy designer clothes but can't afford them anymore because a pair of shoes is $1,800, they might still want to spend $700 or $800 on something. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity in that space. But again, the size of these businesses, they're still going to be big. They're going to be profitable, but they are maybe not going to grow as quickly as they did in the last 20 years. And so there needs to be an understanding of what consumers are prioritizing. So, we see these lines outside of these stores, and sometimes they're real and a lot of times they're not. Like, it's like sort of fabricated. And does anyone really want to stand in line anymore for a t-shirt or a pair of sneakers or a handbag? It's just not how people want to spend their time at this moment in history.
Lauren Sherman, Fashion People podcast, author of Selling Sexy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lauren. Max Chafkin, it is time for our underrated stories. Do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay,
and
fire
Stacey,
away.
You're going to give me a hard time, almost as hard a time as you gave me for having a $120 shirt on.
I just asked
underrated
asked
story
a question
is about Elon Musk. Again, as I often do.
God.
Sorry.
Never getting away from this
Sorry.
guy. Okay, how is Elon doing?
Okay,
I feel
what's
like
up
it's
with
been
Elon?
like several days since I've heard about him.
Should we rename this segment? Anyway, Elon Musk has announced, to great fanfare, that he does not care about Mars anymore.
What?
That's
his whole thing.
Maybe I overstated that, but he's Mars is on the back burner, and it's the moon. He's focusing.
For Fashion Week, like Mars is out, the moon is in.
Mars is out, the moon is in.
What's the appeal of the moon?
Well, I think there are two things going on. One is
Mars has got to feel spurned.
There's more money in talking about the moon right now. The U.S. government is preparing these missions to the moon. It's called Artemis. There are going to be billions, maybe even tens of billions of dollars spent in that. Elon Musk, being a savvy guy who kind of tries to go where the U.S. government money is following that. But Musk is essentially saying it's easier. We can go to the moon. It's a lot closer. You can go back and forth.
That's undeniably true.
It's undeniably true. And he is talking about, I kid you not, making, and I should say, completely straight face, this is not a bit as far as I can tell, making AI factories on the moon. It sounds like a
AI
bit.
factories like solar panels to data.
Yeah, solar panels and chips, and they're going to slingshot those from the moon into orbit.
I think the moon deserves better.
I think this is all very unrealistic, but as somebody who has followed the Elon Musk and the Elon Musk companies for basically like 2 decades now, it is very strange watching a guy who's basically spent the last 20 years saying Mars is the thing, Mars is the thing, Mars is the thing, to Mars is out, moon is in.
I think he sold out Mars. I feel like, how do you imagine Mars feels about this? Like, he was all
Those
about
rovers.
Mars. They had this love affair.
The rovers
now
are just,
suddenly he's just dropped Mars for the moon because it's easier.
Yeah, I know.
It's
the
typical.
rovers are just going to be roving around in a very lonely way.
Apparently to AI factories.
I just
think this is a very bleak version of the moon. By the way, do you know I own property on the moon?
That can't be true.
It is true.
What does that
the
even mean?
Lunar Embassy. I bought property on the moon. I own an acre.
Does the Lunar Embassy actually own the moon? I feel like you just got swindled.
It's slightly controversial, but I do. I own a parcel of land on the moon.
All right. Well, when Elon opens his factory on the moon,
I expect
you can
compensation
cash
at
in.
least.
What's your underrated story?
Okay, so my underrated story has to do with real estate. So, we've been talking about the K-shaped economy for the last X number of months, and I feel like this is the latest, and I have to say my personal favorite iteration of it, which is there's a great story in the Wall Street Journal about this, about luxury real estate, like a lot of, the very most expensive houses built in LA and New York and these big sprawling estates. And apparently security has become just this increasingly big deal. There's a great number in here, apparently from Coldwell Banker. The mentions of security are about 40, now about like half of luxury homes, where it was more like a third just a couple of years ago. And we're talking things like moats.
Moats?
Moats are back.
Wait, you mean like back from the 15th century? Like
yes,
they went out of style.
Back when the K-shaped economy
in the Renaissance
was like the original K-shaped economy, like medieval times. Yeah, so moats are back, but also these other kind of interesting security measures. They talk about one house that had 13 deadbolts on the front door. And then also these kinds of trees called sour orange trees are very in vogue. They're spiky. Ooh. I guess they smell really nice, but they have like spikes all over them. So you can plant them around your property for safety. But this like increase leaning into security for the very rich.
So bleak. Moats are bleak, Stacey. This is kind of depressing. And this is what we're worried about.
It's good news if you're an alligator.
This is what we're worried about with the K-shaped economy.
There's more real estate for alligators, but maybe not for the rest of us.
It's not just that, hey, it's bad to live in a world where, a very small number of people control a vast percentage of the wealth, but also like it creates social instability. It creates a market for moats and alligators and all sorts of stuff. Also, people need to chill out. Like there's too much security in our world. I would argue.
I think it also speaks to this like us and them kind of mentality that's been growing in this country, where it's like very much a zero. They always say in economics, zero-sum game. This is always the thing. And I do not believe that's true. And there are a million economic studies that back me up that when a society gets wealthier and that wealth is able to, if most people are able to access that wealth, then you don't need sour orange trees in every corner of your compound.
One thing I'll say in praise of moats, though.
Tell me.
Nice to have like a little water, a little like
a water feature. I mean, I honestly like moats are kind of awesome. Like, what is wrong? Like, but it just feels like a bad sign. This show is produced by Stacey Wong and Jasmine J.T. Green. Magnus Henriksen is our supervising producer. Sam Rogich handles engineering, and Dave Purcell fact checks. Special thanks to Jeff Muskus, Julia Rubin, and Maria Ling. And if you have a minute, please rate and review the show. It really means a lot to us. Also, if you have a story that should be our business, send us an email. Everybody's@bloomberg.net. That is everybody's with an S at bloomberg.net. Thank you for listening and see you next week.